Hi, everybody, and welcome to another author chat. I have Cynthia Hilston with me today, and she is the author of Lorna versus Laura. So, Cynthia, you want to tell the viewers just a little bit about yourself?
Hi, so my name's Cynthia Hilston. I live in the Cleveland, Ohio area, and my book actually takes place where I mostly, I've lived here my whole life, so I write kind of the area I know. All my books actually take place in the Cleveland area. And I started writing original works pretty seriously in early 2015. And before that, I actually I always wanted to do this, but it was just kind of intimidating. And so I just thought one day, I'm like, I'm going to sit down and just write for even if it's 15 minutes a day and just hold myself to that commitment. And so I've just kind of been doing that, and it's been amazing.
Well, that's great. And so I read your Lorna versus Laura, and I really loved it. And I loved especially some of the things that you said about how our emotional journeys and our faith can both be in harmony and conflict throughout our lives. And I thought that was really a beautiful thing about the book. But you did a great job writing broken characters. So, what was it about Lorna versus Laura that drew you to that story?
Well, it's funny, what actually started the story was it was when I was writing my first book, Hannah's Rainbow. Hannah was a character based off my late grandma, and whole fiction novel like Lorna versus Laura. And when I got to the period where she was living in this bungalow, and it was around the 1940s, and her husband had been drafted, I was trying to think about what to write. And so my husband comes up with this silly idea, oh, give her a weird neighbor, who just and he kind of made this joke because my father-in-law loves rocks. He's a geologist and he likes to talk about rocks. And he's like, make him like rocks or something. And so I started thinking about after I finished my first book, I'm like, what if I take that idea? And so Lorna has this strange neighbor who just has rocks in his yard. And I just started there, and I thought well, why does he have just rocks in his yard? And so it just kind of that I had to then define these characters. I knew that this woman had gone through a lot of loss, that she was young, she'd lost her parents, and now her brother's been drafted, and her neighbor is going to mirror her in some ways, but he's going to be closed off. And I just started brainstorming that because I just love reading stories about broken characters, and seeing them find love and find that everybody's loved, everyone's worthy of love, and that especially romance, I'm a sap, I guess, and I just kind of get drawn into those stories where kind of two broken people come together and create something beautiful. So that was just kind of I just thought okay, well, how am I gonna get there? And it was just a fun go through, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think you did a beautiful job with that. There's some really striking imagery that you used throughout the book that just had such emotional resonance to it. Not the loneliness of the rocks is definitely one that stands out as you start learning about this broken man and why there are these rocks. And I loved that metaphor that carried through his healing and his emotional state through those rocks. So I'm curious, what is your writing process? How do you go about creating a novel that's both beautiful and emotional and kind of fun and full of love?
Um, so I will admit I'm not a big outliner. I know sometimes they say you should have this whole outline of your whole book, and plan every chapter and do all this organization. And I'm one of these people who I just want to get in there and write and just kind of see where it takes me. I guess stream of consciousness. When I sit down to write a novel, I always know my ending. And so a lot of times I'll write the ending, maybe not first, but way before I'm actually there. And so it's I actually have that ending written. And so the process of how do I get there is always just a journey for me, that I feel as I write these characters more and more, I just get a feel for them. And it's you hear authors say all the time, oh, my character kind of took the story over and kind of dictated where it needed to go next. It's these characters just start becoming more flesh and blood to me as I work with them, because you spend so many months just like, creating them. And so as I write them, then I actually step aside and kind of like do like an outline just to kind of see like where I've been, and I'll do like character profiles and stuff because I want to then make sure I'm being consistent, because it's like the more you get into it, I feel like the more up because they're becoming like more complex, you know.
Well, that's really fantastic. I wanted to start asking writers, I'm sorry to spring this one on you, but what's like either your favorite book, or what book do you have that you have read that you just love and think about a lot?
Um, I think, well, I would have to say Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I reread it last year, and the first time I read it was in 2006. And it was like the first book I read that just, again, you talk about two very broken characters falling in love, and it just was so poetic, but it was like, there's so much poetry in the prose that it was, I don't know, like that spoke to me because I feel like that's kind of how I write, and I do write poetry, but it just was this beautiful love story. And I just was like, after I got done reading it for the first time, I was like, I wish I could meet Charlotte Bronte. I can't believe she's been gone for like 150 years, because it felt like that time span between her and I was like nothing. Like I felt like she was with me in the room because I was reading the words she'd written, and they just spoke so much to me. And so I reread it like this past year, and now being older amazes me how much more it resonates. Like I've been married 14 years now, and so it's like as I've gotten older, I think my understanding of love and stuff has matured. And so I just it's like one of those books that I think I'll always go back to, and throughout my life, and just kind of see how it sits with me.
I think it's definitely the hallmark of a great book when you can pick it up at different stages in your life and it means something new at the same time, bringing back whatever you felt that first time you read it. I always feel a connection to my past, present, and future when I read one of those really great books that resonates. So,
Yeah.
as we wind this up, what's next? What are you working on right now? Where do you see your writing going?
Well, so it's funny, when I wrote my first book, the one Hannah's Rainbow, that was based on my late grandma, I got done with that book and I thought, am I going to write any more books, or was I just meant to write this one book? Well, then it's funny, I started working on a spin-off of that about Harry, who's Hannah's brother. So I started that book because there were people who were interested in his character. And then I actually started Lorna at the same time, and then Lorna kind of took over. And though I finished that, and then I worked on Harry's story, which now that's going through the editing process. I'm part of a writers group at my library, so that's now in editing. And I recently finished my fourth manuscript. It's the first draft, but it was exactly a week ago. It's called Ariana, and it is all my books are kind of like in the same universe, if you will. Like there will be like cameos of a character from one book and another, or Ariana takes place in Cleveland, but it's current day. And it was fun to write current day instead of a historical fiction, because I didn't have to worry about like language and like, oh, they didn't say that back then. And it was kind of like, it was easier to write, but it was one of those stories just kept like going and going, and I was like, oh my gosh, she was like kind of harder to get to know, but she has a connection to Lorna, and I don't want to say what it is because it would give away the ending of Lorna. But so I just finished that, and I have one current project now that's called Mile Marker 139, which actually is based on a rest area along the Ohio Turnpike. And it was based off of an idea my husband had about like rest areas. Like, wouldn't it be weird to like, people watch there, or like what goes on? Like, the people who just come and go. It's just a place where a lot of people come and go. And he just, it was again just something that came from a conversation. So that book is, again, it kind of explores the theme of loss. I think all my books kind of explore some of the same themes, and that is almost 100 pages, and I do have stuff, you know, brainstormed beyond this, so I think I have plenty of stuff to work with.
Well, fantastic. And I kind of forgot to ask you, are you indie or traditionally published, and why did you go that route?
I am an indie author, and so I know it's really hard to get your foot in the door into a traditional publishing company. And so when I wrote my first book, I had no idea, how hard it really was until I queried agents. I went through this whole process. I think I queried like 100 agents, and I got a lot of, rejections. Everyone was nice and everything and encouraged me. But, I realized that, like, well, I'm just gonna if I just said, well, if I can't traditionally publish, I will just do it because it's so easy now with Amazon. So I wound up doing indie. And then the second time around, I thought, well, I'll try again to query. And it was kind of the same process. But I think going forward, I'll probably just stick with the indie author stuff because I know a lot of other indie authors and I feel like we got to kind of stick together. And, I've seen indie authors be successful, but to me, it's not about like making money or being successful in terms, I guess, of how many people read my books. For me, it's my love of writing and my wanting to share a story that's in my heart with others. And it's just cool to me if like one other person reads it and it resonates with them. So I just, want to share my joy of writing with others. And if they want to read it.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you shared the story of Lorna versus Laura. I really did enjoy it, and I appreciate you so much being here with me today.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. So you can find her contact information in the description to this video once it gets archived. And please go check out Lorna versus Laura or Hannah's Rainbow and see what Cynthia Hilston is all about in the indie publishing world. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. And Cynthia, good luck on your next projects.
Thank you.